Good morning. You're watching CUSP Network's Energy Poverty and Equity Mapping Tool webinar for utilities, the abridged version. We had a longer conversation about this on Monday. If you attended the webinar, I've condensed it down to, I'm aiming for at least a 10 or 15-minute summary of the key details that you need to remember from our. So I am the Data Insights Manager for CUSP Network. CUSP Network is a network of Canada's large and leading cities, representing more than half of Canada's population, just a little more than half of Canada's GDP. Let me go to the next slide here. We've developed Canada's first interactive data set and mapping tool on energy poverty. And this took about 18 months of prep and wrangling with Stats Canada data. And you can now measure energy poverty, a quantitative proxy for energy poverty. And I'll get into that a bit later, across different geographical scales from census division down to census tracts. And you can cross-tabulate that across a range of variables like demographics, housing characteristics, incomes, and so on. Our website, energypoverty.ca, also has additional information like policy briefs and guidelines. If you're a local municipality or you work very closely with a local municipality, there's a design guide on how to build more equitable, local, clean energy programs. Now, one of the reasons why we developed this mapping tool is because we believe at CUSP that equity and inclusion is a overarching goal of climate work. The first generation of climate and clean energy programs were not there are certain groups that were underrepresented in those programs. And in order for us to meet our ambitious, in order for municipalities across the country to meet their ambitious 100% renewable, 100% net zero climate goals, we have to develop programs for broad adoption. In order to do that, we need to better understand the geographic, demographic, housing tenure, housing type, building characteristics that drive patterns of energy poverty in our households and in our communities. So by better measuring energy poverty, and then using that as a tool to better understand the characteristics that drive energy poverty, we believe that we can center the households and communities that have previously been underrepresented in prior generations of the program, and the new version of the clean energy programs can be designed for broader adoption. Now, in order to do that, we first began by developing a quantitative proxy for energy poverty. Energy poverty, is an experience of households that do not adequately heat or cool their homes, or can't afford to, run appliances and so on. There's different ways in which it manifests itself. We're focusing on creating a quantitative proxy, and we're calling it the high home energy cost burden. What that means is, if a median Canadian household spends 3% of their after-tax income on home energy needs. We're talking about heating and cooling and appliances, not transportation. It's a whole other bailiwick. We can get to that perhaps in a different day. But if a median household in Canada, we've calculated, spends 3% of their after-tax income on home energy needs. And we followed some best practices from other jurisdictions to define households that experience energy poverty as households that spend 2 times the national median. So if a household spends 6% or more of their after-tax income on home energy needs, that household is defined as a household that experiences high energy cost burdens, which is a quantitative proxy for energy poverty. So when you're rifling through these slides on your own time, every time it says high home energy cost burdens, remember that it's a proxy for households experiencing energy poverty. What I'm going to do is talk very briefly about the different ways that utilities can use this tool. let's get into it. Okay, so here's 4 different ways as a utility you can use this tool to improve program design, improve the households that we target. So, and again, these are just 4. I present these as a starting point, and encourage you to dive further into the data. So, one way you can use this tool is. Okay, let me step into the website first. So this is the energypoverty.ca website. If you're seeing that on my screen, yep, it's bilingual. It's in English and it's in French. You will go to the tool. There's some videos here that will that are how-to videos that show you some of the things I'm about to show you today. You can watch it on your own time. You launch the tool. It'll open up this, this pan-Canadian this mapping tool and this data set. Now, you can scroll in and out anywhere in the country and look at a glance at some key variables. So now I'm going to show you 4 ways you can use this mapping tool. Number 1, you can go here to the top left, click on an indicator. There's a whole range of them, from incomes to home energy affordability to housing-based indicators and demographics. You can click on one and then this map will change. You can click on a geographic boundary. For example, I'm going to focus in on Kenora, Ontario. And once you're done looking at it at a glance, you can look at the number of households as well, in addition to the percentage. And for this particular geographic boundary, you can also look at other indicators that we just looked at. So that's number 1. Second thing you can do is go to the top right here, which is the ranking tool. You'll select an indicator. So this is what we defined earlier as the proxy for home energy cost burdens. Okay, let's stay with Ontario, look at census divisions. Now, what this table here is showing you is the ranking. So the ranking of census divisions by percentage of households that experience this particular indicator, which is energy poverty. So this is telling me that Haliburton in Ontario, 63% of households in Haliburton experience high energy cost burdens. So that's my rank. So if you're a utility, you're looking at your service area, you might want to first, perhaps even actually begin here by looking at what jurisdictions within your service area have a high rate of energy poverty. Then you can click on this jurisdiction, look a little bit more into detail on what factors might be driving those energy poverty in that area, what the number of households are that experience energy poverty in that area. Now, here's another thing you can do. Let's say you select a different indicator. For example, households in low income. Now, what this is telling me is for Haliburton, there's around 1,400 houses, or about 18% of houses in that census division are households in low income. Now, you might be curious, right? You might be wondering how many households actually experience energy poverty. Now, this is the magic button here. If you click on that, so is now cross-tabbed with energy poverty. So what this is telling me is that 1,365 houses in Haliburton experience energy poverty and are in low income. So what this crosstab does is for this indicator that you've chosen, it will crosstab that with the universe of households experiencing energy poverty. So what this is telling me here is that not all households that are in low income, for this specific example here in Haliburton, do also experience energy poverty. And you can do this for any other variable. For example, let's look at seniors. Senior households in Haliburton, there's 3,700 households. Looks like actually almost half of Haliburton is senior households. Now I hit on the cross tab. What this is telling me is 2,400 households are 2,400 senior households also experience energy poverty, or vice versa. 2,400 households that experience energy poverty are also households for seniors. So, and another way that you can interact with this mapping tool is you can really zoom in on, for example, I'm going to look at Guelph. which is where I currently live, and then just really dig into some of these crosstabs. So if you look at, for example, let's say recent immigrant households in Guelph that experience energy poverty, Guelph is a relatively small town. There might not be a lot of them. So let's look at Toronto, for example. There's 12,415 recent immigrant households that experience energy poverty. Now, if you're a utility that services this area, what is your strategy for reaching these households? Who are your channel partners? What of households that speak neither English nor French predominantly at home? There's close to 50,000 households in Toronto that speak neither English nor French. Now, if your energy efficiency or energy assistance programming language is going out in English and or French, what is your strategy for reaching these households? So these are the kind of questions you might be asking yourself as you work and interact with this data. Now, I'm going to go back to the presentation. As you go through the slide deck, I've listed some questions that you kind of might want to ask yourself just to feel your way around the data. I present these as just starting points. I would encourage you to dig a little deeper. How many households are in low income but are also experiencing high energy cost burdens? How many households, further down here, I challenge you to ask what percentage of homeowners and what percentage of renters. And there's different ways that you can look at this data set. I don't presuppose to know all the different ways that you might be curious about. I just wanted to present some of these questions as a starting point to get you interested in digging into this data. I'm going to stop here now because I promised you that this was an abridged presentation. I would ask you to reach out to me. I'm the Data Insights Manager with CUSP, or to reach out to Allison, who's the Managing Director for the CUSP Network. We primarily work with municipalities. So if out of our 17 members, many of them, if not all of them, fall into service areas of some of the folks on the call with us on Monday. If you're looking at developing a new pilot program or looking at new ways of reaching previously underserved populations, I would encourage you to start working with some of our municipal members or to reach out to us directly. Any questions about the mapping tool? If you want to dig into, almost forgot. One last point. I'll go back to the mapping tool. What you're seeing here on the mapping tool itself is the tip of an iceberg of a whole treasure trove of amazing data that we cannot practically put on the mapping tool. So right now we are cross-tabulating two variables, right? So we're looking at senior households that also experience high energy cost burdens. What if you're wondering, I want to really target senior households that are in low income but also experience high energy cost burdens? At the moment, you can't do that on the mapping tool, but we have data in the background, and if you want access to the data, if you're looking at asking these interesting questions that we haven't tackled yet on the mapping tool on this presentation, please reach out to us. My contact information is here. And thanks again for attending our webinar. And I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. Cheers.